Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Global Read for 2013, hosted by Primary Source. We are joined by author Thanhha Lai today, the author of Inside Out and Back Again, the wonderful novel that you have all read. We have folks joining us from across the country, from Maine to Ohio to Oregon, Texas, Chicago, Massachusetts, and I'm sure a few places in between. If you want to show us on the map that's in front of you where you're located, you can use the little starburst or the pencil in the toolbar to indicate your approximate location. We have 27 students from Chicago joining us. We've got a group from Mathis, Texas, another group from the Portland, Oregon area, 6th graders, 4th, 5th graders, 8th graders, teachers, librarians. So this promises to be an exciting hour with our Q&A and with Thanhha. So welcome. And as I mentioned, this is our 2013 Global Read. Primary Source has done this each year as a way to encourage people to read literature you might not necessarily read. Read literature that is about the world, about different cultures, different histories that you might not encounter every day in the literature that you read. So Inside Out and Back Again is a wonderful novel that talks about the immigrant experience, the refugee experience, what it was like to have to leave a country at war and come to the United States in 1975. And it has themes that resonate even today. If you are just joining us, there is an audio setup wizard where you can test your audio and speakers. That is the blue microphone with the red button in the top left of your screen. If you would like to ask a question during our Q&A time, you can raise your hand. The raise hand button is the third button underneath your name. And once you raise your hand and we call on you, you can just press the talk button and you can ask your question. Please wait until we do call on you to press the talk button and ask your question. We have a lot of people on the virtual conference call today, and we don't want to talk over each other. We also don't want to have any quality issues in our audio. So if you can just wait until we call on you, that would be great. You can also ask questions through the comment or the chat box. This is located at the bottom left of your screen. You can ask questions at any time, and I will collect and moderate those and pose those to Thanhha later on in our chat. As I mentioned before, this Global Read Q&A is hosted by Primary Source. We're a nonprofit organization located just outside of Boston. We work with approximately 2,500 teachers every year. Those teachers, of course, reach hundreds more and thousands more students throughout the year and throughout their career. Our mission is to teach for global understanding. So we're helping prepare students through their teachers to thrive in a global economy and be critical thinkers and more open and flexible thinkers. Through courses like this or through experiences like this, we get to bring together teachers and students for conversations that we hope are enriching and will stay with you throughout your lifetime. So now I'm excited to welcome Thanhha Lai. Thanhha is the author of Inside Out and Back Again. She has a journalism degree from the University of Texas at Austin and a Master of Fine Arts from New York University. Inside Out and Back Again is her debut novel, and it won the National Book Award for Young People's Literature in 2011. It was also a 2012 Newbery Honor Book. And as many of you have read this book, you know that it is quite special and quite a moving novel to read. So I'm going to turn it over to Thanhha to tell us a little bit about herself and the book. And after she's finished, in about 10 minutes, we'll open it up for Q&A. And as I said, if you have any questions, you can post them in the chat box at any time. Otherwise, you can raise your hand during the Q&A in about 10 minutes. Thanhha.
Hello there. Hi. Let me just first pronounce my name for you. It's Thanhha Life. And as you know, this book is based on, very loosely, based on a pivotal year in my life when I was 10, and we had moved from Vietnam directly to Montgomery, Alabama, and I did not speak English. And very much what I went through in the novel, I went through in real life. I just had to embellish it a bit and drive up the narrative in order to make it a good read. In Vietnam, my name is not Thanhha. They just called me Ha, H-A with the accent drop. And I named the little girl in the novel after myself simply because I could. You know, you sit here and you write and you get quite bored, so you do what you can to just lighten it up a little. But when I moved to Alabama, they didn't want to say Ha. Instead, they called me Ha Ha Ha. And so I thought I would punish my classmates by grafting my middle name, which is Tang, to my first name, Ha, and make it Thanhha, and just confuse everyone and make them pronounce it. But what happens is that when you graft it, I ended up with way too many H's in my first name, and now nobody can pronounce it, including the Vietnamese. Everybody's confused. So now I spend my entire life pronouncing my first name for everybody. So that just tells you a little bit about how punishment does not work out. But back in '75, when I arrived in Montgomery, I did not speak English. And so it was pretty much a rushed English course. I learned it on the playground in the back of my elementary school from Alabama and fourth graders. So then I had to spend the next decade correcting my own grammar. And I will tell you, until this day, English baffles me. I'm still dealing with the verb tenses. I think I will be doing this until the day I die. The Vietnamese is incredibly logical, and so verb tenses will always stump me. But one of the reasons why this novel is written in prose poems instead of just sentences, regular prose, is that for the longest time I spent about 15 years of my life writing a similar story, but much more expanded for adults, and it had to do with a Vietnamese family, a large Vietnamese family, moving to Alabama. And I never could get that novel right because I didn't have the voice, and I was writing sentences in prose, and it just fell apart. It was convoluted, it was a mess, and it never worked out. And then, so I put that novel aside, just disgusted. And then one day I'm standing in New York City on a playground with my daughter, and suddenly all these feelings started coming back to me about how I felt when I was standing on a playground in Montgomery, Alabama. And the kind of feelings that came back to me did not come in sentences. Like I was not thinking I was feeling very sad. Instead, phrases and images came back to me like flashes of red, flashes of orange, elongated pieces of meat, red, yellow stripes, red stripes. And all of this, I realized, was the voice of this little girl because she's thinking in Vietnamese and not English. And Vietnamese, you might know, is derived from Chinese, because the Chinese conquered us for about 10,000 years. So a lot of Vietnamese is derived from Chinese. And Chinese, of course, is not based on letters, the Roman letters, alphabet, but it's based on pictures, those characters. So built into Vietnamese is just automatic images, and so it just naturally lends itself to poetic, melodic phrases, and so that's why the novel is written in prose poems, just to kind of reflect how a 10-year-old would think in Vietnamese. And so I think as I go around the country talking to schools, that's the number one question I'm always asked: am I a poet? And I will tell you that I am not. I am an accidental poet in the sense that I stumbled upon this voice. My background is in journalism, and if you know anything about journalism, it's not poetry. You just run out there and get the story, and it's about how, when, what, and why. And so, you know, this void, the way the novel is written, surprised me just as much as it surprised you, because I did not know that I could do this. But it's been an amazing 2 or 3 years since the novel came out, and I'm so appreciative of everyone who's teaching it. because when I wrote it, I very much had teachers in mind. And it was because I was a member of the Society of Children's and Book Writers, Illustrator, of course, I can't get the acronym right. But in there, somebody had written that they would love to see a book about the Vietnam War that wasn't a textbook, that wasn't so clinical and cold. So I thought I can do that. I'll just write a novel and pretty much set it in Vietnam for this little girl, and you'll be able to feel and taste and pretty much smell what Vietnam was like. And I struggled with making sure that I represented Vietnam in a way that was true to this little girl, because even today, I think most people have certain ideas of what Vietnam was, and it was a war. Whereas for me and for this character, Vietnam wasn't a war because, to tell you the truth, I didn't think about war while I was in Vietnam. It was just a place I lived, and I never saw the war. It was somewhere else. It wasn't in Saigon. And so I wanted to just convey what it was like to live inside a war and not be completely conscious of it every second of the day, and just really have a great childhood within this atmosphere of war. So then I came up with this. And I believe Jennifer has some images that she's going to show you, and then I'll just see. When I think of Vietnam, this is what I think about. This is just a traditional dragon dance that you would see at Thanhha, and we borrowed it from the Chinese for Lunar New Year. And I didn't have a chance to put this image into the novel because there's so much going on. But when I think of Vietnam and when I tell my child about Vietnam, this is what I tell her about. You know, at Thanhha, we have this dragon dance, and everything is yellow and red to represent the yellow skin of the Vietnamese and the red of the blood, of our blood. And so it's a very different than the images you'll see later on. Can you see the next image? This is a papaya tree. For those of you who have never seen a papaya, I will tell you that I did not have a papaya tree growing in my backyard. I made this whole thing up because I, for some reason, tore out this picture of a papaya tree from the New Yorker one year and just taped the image onto my computer, and it sat there for decades to the point where the paper was yellowing. And indeed, in this image, you have these beautiful, huge, broad fan-like leaves, and you have these orange piglet-like fruit clinging to the trunk. And I thought, there's so much potential, there's so much poetic imagery potential in this tree that I'm just going to include in the novel. And once I did, I just ran with it all the way from fresh papaya to the dry papaya that she was finding out about. Next image. Alright, so this is a rice field, and you know, this is what I think about when I think of Vietnam. I'm just trying to show you images that would be going through the character's mind and would be going through my mind as I imagine Vietnam. This is just a rice field. You have a woman bent over tending to the rice, and she's got on the iconic cone hat. This is the Southern Vietnamese flag. As you remember in the section of the novel, when they lower the South Vietnamese flag, this is what they're lowering. It is yellow in the background with 3 red stripes. And so when Ha was eating a hot dog with mustard and ketchup, she was thinking they were making fun of the flag because it looked yellow and red. It looks like the flag. And so many wars have been fought because of flags. And you know, when the flag was lowered on the ship, everyone was sure that they would never see this flag again. But I can tell you now that it is flying high and mighty all over Southern California in the section called Orange County. There's a whole region called Little Saigon, and that's where all the Vietnamese refugees pretty much have ended up living. There are more Vietnamese in Southern California in this Orange County section than anywhere else in the world outside of Vietnam. So this flag is still around. Next one. And this is the official flag of Vietnam right now. This is the communist flag. This is the flag that the soldiers brought on their tanks to plant on top of the presidential palace. And I just wanted to juxtapose the 2 flags together. They look so innocuous and they look rather beautiful, but they stand for so much bloodshed because people will fight for years for the right to put one or the other flag up. So, but now I don't even believe in flags. They can scare me. Next one. And this is a very, very popular image that came out of the Vietnam War. It's a real, it's a journal review that won a Pulitzer, and it is of a naked girl running down the street. She had been napalmed, and she's crying, And this is the kind of image that was being shown on TV at the end of the war in '75. So by the time I arrived in Montgomery, Alabama, you know, my classmates thought I was this girl, and you can't blame them for thinking that because that was all they knew about Vietnam. So I guess they expected me to also be running around the class and making fine. I have no idea, but that's what they related with. But I will tell you, I didn't see this image until much later when I was researching the Vietnam War in high school. So I wasn't even aware of this image, and yet that's how everyone saw me at first when I landed in Alabama. Next one. And when I think of Vietnam, and until this day, this is what I think about. In Vietnam, when we go to school, we wear uniforms, and all the girls wear these long white ao, and the one in red would be the teacher. She can wear whatever color she wants. And when school starts in the morning or lets out in the afternoon, the whole city would turn into these white doves, and they would kind of float around everywhere. The boys would wear blue pants with a white shirt. They're not as glowy or floaty. But it's not conducive to PE, and it is tight-fitting, and in a hot country, you know, they put these girls in these long-sleeve tight-fitting dresses that are just the uniform. And it's been around for forever, and it's still going on today. Next one. Yeah, okay, we're back. And so I just wanted to show you images of Vietnam to get a sense of the juxtaposition between what people think a country would be like because of its war reputation and what it was actually like for me. And so very much as I go around the country, most of my talks are about the juxtaposition between the real for me and the perceived for the others. And I will tell you that today that Vietnam still jars people, just the word Vietnam. If you're of my generation, you know, 45 and up, you experienced it directly in some way. And it's something that still it pushes people's buttons. And so it's interesting to see what people think about when they think about the word Vietnam. And I know that children today are being introduced to it. And to them, it was just another war in the distance somewhere. So I'll be interested to see what questions the students have versus what questions the teachers have. And I will answer them all.
Thank you, Thanhha. I'm worried I'm going to say that wrong, and I think that I was. I apologize. I practiced. We do have a lot of questions already, so why don't we jump on in? So one of the first questions we have is from Sydney, and she asks, how close were the details about the school experiences, the details in the book, how close were those to the actual truth of what you experienced?
Okay, well, in Alabama, I was definitely bullied, but there wasn't any one pink boy. What I did was that I kind of amalgamated all the bullies that I've known in my life, and I kind of made this new clay figure with this pink boy, just to like dramatize the situation. Certainly, I felt uncomfortable. I probably felt like it was as bad as it was in the book, but I would tell you that it was dramatized. Boys did chase me, people did yell things at me, people did pull my arm hair, all of that was true.
Thank you. And you also you're one of 9 children. Yes. In the book, you're one of, I think, 4. The brothers in the book, are they similar to any of your siblings? Did you base them off of some of your siblings?
I did. I do have 6 brothers in real life, and in the first draft of this novel, I put all 6 of them in there, not naming them because my brother said you cannot use my name. So then the brothers that are in the book are their sons' names. I named them after my nephews. But I had 6 boys in there, and it was just too much. You know, I couldn't keep them straight, and I'm sure my readers couldn't either. So then I knew I had to just shave them down. And so what I do is that I took characteristics of all of my brothers and put them into each of the boy characters. So in other words, if you see Brother Luke, he has characteristics of probably all 6 of my brothers. I just kind of mixed it all up. So they can't look at any one character and say that's me, but they will recognize themselves in the characters that I've created.
Thank you.
And Jill from the Magnet School, the Fraser Magnet School in Chicago, did you all have a question?
My name is Mia Smith from Fraser in Chicago, and my question is, in the story, the main person that bullies Ha is Pink Boy, and what may he resemble figuratively in the story?
as I mentioned before, Pink Boy wasn't real as far as there wasn't a person named Pink Boy in my life, but he has all the characteristics of all the bullies that I encountered in Alabama, so I just put it all into one person.
Fraser Magnet School, do you want to ask another question?
Okay, my name is Nia. What role does the papaya tree, like in Han's situation, relate to something that was special to you back at home before you left to Alabama?
I certainly ate a lot of papayas in Vietnam, even if I didn't have an actual tree in the backyard. The papaya has always been very close to my heart, and even today it's my favorite fruit. You have to go all the way to Hawaii to get fresh papaya from a tree. Otherwise, they ship them in green, and then they eventually turn orange as they sit around, and it just does not taste the same. So when I think of a papaya, I just think of all the warmth and the goodness and the natural sweetness that was around, that were around for my childhood, and so it's special. You know, it's not just a fruit. It just means so much more. It means home.
And Shreya from Oregon Episcopal School asks, why are there so many wars over flags?
You know, I wish I knew. I know that each country, for some reason, is compelled to design a flag for itself. And if you look at the history of war, you will find that countries will just fight so that they have the right to put a flag here and a flag there. And the same thing with what went on with colonization. Everywhere there were flags. And so I'm all for just doing away with flags. I wonder if that will just scare most people. So I don't know. You know, right now, flags are still really controversial. If you put a communist flag, a Vietnamese communist flag, up in Southern California where the refugees from Vietnam are living, you would get in trouble because they don't want to see a communist flag. They want to see their old flag. But then if you go to Vietnam and you put up the old Southern Vietnamese flag, you would get in trouble because the idea is the communists won the war and they're going to put their flag up. So it's still incredibly tense, and so I question the whole idea of flags. But I don't know why they fight over flags.
Thank you. That's a tough question. Memorial School, you had a question. Memorial School, be sure to hit the talk button and you can ask your question.
Hi, I'm Lainey, and my question is, do you feel honored to be an MCBA author this year?
I do. It's been, you know what? When you write a book, you kind of just sit on your own in your room, and you can't even imagine what it would be like to just see it in book form. Remember, I've never published a book before, so when I was writing, I was very much in the dark. All I was doing was just being consumed by getting this voice right for the character. I didn't have an agent, and of course, I didn't know it was going to be published, and I certainly didn't know what the cover would look like. And so everything has been amazingly surprising and wonderful. You know, I don't think you can ever imagine this kind of reception for your first book. It's just my agent is forever reminding me that this does not happen often and don't get used to it. So it's been amazing.
We had an earlier question from Nelson, and he asked, what is the favorite part of your book?
My favorite part of the book has to do with all the poems that had to do with English grammar. The Rule 1 and Rule 2 and Rule 3. Because until this day, I do not understand English grammar. And my daughter is learning it now, and I just struggle to teach it to her. Because I didn't learn, you know, from books. I just kind of learned it on the playground, and then I winged it. And then I went back and probably studied every grammar book that's out there, and it still doesn't make sense to me. And I do know that I can never go by what sounds like. You know, sometimes people say, well, just go by what sounds like. I can't do that because to me nothing sounds right. So when I got to make fun of English a little bit, I was very happy.
And Mathis International School, you had a question. You can press the talk. There you go.
My name is Amber Rodriguez, and I wanted to ask you, how did you feel when you started writing this really amazing book?
How did I feel? I think I was just relieved more than anything that I finally found a voice, meaning a way to tell the story. I knew right away that it was going to work, that I found the right voice to tell the story about a little girl in Vietnam. Before this, I had worked for 15 years on another novel that went nowhere because the voice was wrong. So as a writer, you know, you struggle for years and years and years and years to find the right voice. And then when it does happen, it's almost like being handed a slice of heaven. It's unbelievably satisfying. So while I was writing it, it went very fast. From the time I found the voice to a first draft, it only took me 6 weeks. So it felt good. This was a book that from beginning to end, everything works perfectly. And I don't know if this will ever happen to me again, but I'm grateful to at least have this one experience.
And there's another question from Oregon, from Peyton, kind of following up on that. What made you want to write the book?
Well, it's a very writerly response. I had spent 15 years pretty much struggling to write a story that, one, I was not ready to write, and two, I think I was just too ambitious. I couldn't do it. And so then I thought, instead of trying to, in this other book that I was writing, I was trying to cover 4,000 years of Vietnamese history. I probably had 20 characters. It spanned, it went through like 8 locations, and it was just too ambitious and huge. And so when I wrote this book, I thought, I'm going to write about something that, one, would require no research, and two, that was manageable. So once I came up with the range, it would go from 75 to 76. So it was 12 months, and I could handle that. And it would have one central character, and it would have 2 locations. It would be Saigon and Alabama. So it felt very manageable to write it. And so it felt good. It felt like this is the project I could do.
And we're getting a lot of questions about your family, your father, your mother. In the book, the father does not come to the United States with the family. Is that a similar experience that you had? We have questions about how did it feel to be without your father? Did you ever get to see your dad? What's happened to your mother?
Right. Everything about my parents in the novel is completely true. My father was and still is missing in action since I was 1. And because I didn't know him, it's very difficult for me to miss him. I was 1 year old. But I can sense who he was through photographs and through stories that my mother told me. And so the kind of pain, the kind of sadness that would accompany this kind of missing in person, I have to project my mother's feelings in order for me to feel anything, because otherwise I wouldn't know enough to miss this person. He is still considered missing in action, because once you're missing in action, it stays present tense unless he's found, or unless they know that he definitely died on this particular date. We don't know anything else other than the fact that he is still missing in action. And of course, it's been, it's been 47 years. So we assume that he has died, but again, we don't know when, we don't know how, and we don't know how old he was. And so it's just a huge void in my mom, like in the sense that she doesn't know what happened to her partner, and she never will. My mother came over here with us in 75, and now she is 83. And she lives in San Diego, California, and she will come and stay with me for 3-4 months out of the year. I am now north of New York City, so I see her often, and she is the only one my daughter will speak Vietnamese to. So she is my daughter's Vietnamese school teacher, basically. And she's had a very traumatic middle life. Her childhood was just very beautiful. Her middle life was hard, and now she's having a beautiful old age again. She has everything she needs. All my brothers are around her, and they come and see her twice, 3 times a week. And I think in the end, everything turned out okay.
Thank you. Jill at Fraser Magnet School, you all had a question.
Hi, my name is Darius. My question was, how could you influence or help younger or other writers that have experienced something similar to you?
No, I'm so sorry, I missed that question.
I said, how could you influence or help other writers that have experienced something similar to you?
Okay, they've experienced. Well, there are 2 ways. Writers who have experienced something similar to me in terms of a traumatic experience when the world is turned upside down, I would first suggest journal writing because you can get a lot of pathos and a lot of what you need to get out in your journal. But I don't think journal writing is good enough in the sense that if all you're conveying to the world is how sad it was or how horrible it was, we already know. And that's why I struggled very, very hard to make sure there was humor in Inside Out and Back Again. Because if I had just told a straight refugee story and it was sad and it was hard, I don't think it would have appealed to as many people because, one, when we read something that's predictable, we tend not to appreciate it as much. You know that if I'm going to write about war, a girl who went through war, a girl who had to leave her homeland and came to a place in Montgomery, Alabama, where she was the first Asian any of her classmates had ever seen, and she was bullied, it's going to be sad. I mean, that's built in. So I spent absolutely no time at all working on sadness because it's there. Whether I wanted to talk about it or not, sadness is a part of her background and trauma is a part of her background. So that just naturally came out when I just told her story. What I focused on instead was her spunk, her spirit, her sense of humor, and how no matter what, she was just, she will make it through. And that was pretty much how we were raised. That's the philosophy in my family. We encountered sadness very, very young. My dad has been missing in action since 1966. But I will tell you that growing up, all we did was laugh. And it sounds unbelievable and it sounds strange, but I think the best way to counter sadness is to laugh. And so there are so many things to laugh about in life if you just choose to look at it that way. So I would advise the writers to leave the sadness alone. It's there. You're going to write about it. And just to focus on something that the readers wouldn't expect, like humor or something else I don't even know about, because that's your job as a writer to surprise me. Bring in something that's going to surprise me.
And Ms. Bauer's class, you have a question.
Hi, this is Dylan from Lake Middle School in Ohio. I was wondering if it was hard emotionally for you to write the book.
It was hard for me emotionally to
write the book.
To write the book. You know what? This happened to me when I was 10. By the time I started writing the book, I was about 40. So 30 years have passed. I don't think I can hang on to that kind of angst, that kind of sadness for that long. 30 years is a very long time. I would say that I had already worked out all the sadness in my system. From 10 to 40, so many other traumatic things are going to happen to a person just from being alive. For one, you have to date, you're going to fall in love, you're going to fall out of love, you're going to get married, or you're not going to get married, you're going to have children or not have children, you're going to go to college, all these other things. And so by the time I wrote it, I was 40. And looking back, it was almost like looking back at someone else's life because I had already worked through all the trauma. I think if I had tried to write it when I was 15, it would just be full of sadness because I wouldn't have been able to work in the humor yet. So there is something to say about waiting to tell your story at a point where you're able to tell it without, just hitting one note. You want to hit many, many notes and not just one. So it wasn't hard at all. Just because that's process.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Memorial School, you had a question.
Hi, I'm Brooke. I had a question. Were you forced to go to the United States or did you choose to?
Well, I wasn't forced, but then I didn't choose to at the same time, so it's a double-edged question. My mother decided that we would all go to the United States because my mother, for one, was older. She had already lived through communism in North Vietnam, so then when it came around again in South Vietnam, she knew what would happen to her children. I, at the age of 10, did not know any of this. All I was thinking about was my doll, my papaya, fresh fruit, and my friends. And so a perspective of a child not wanting to leave her homeland is very, very different than the perspective of a responsible mom who says you must leave, because she knew that if we had stayed in Vietnam, we would not have been able to go to college and we would not be able to have jobs. Because why? We were the children of someone who fought for the losing side of the war. So we would not be one of the people who would have gotten into college. They would have just not let us go. And knowing that, she said, no, we had to leave. And that's why. But I didn't know this. You know, I was 10 years old. I was just pouty and mad. And on the ship, I just thought we would be turning around any second and going home. And it was so chaotic and so much was going on. My mother did not have time to sit me down and explain the whole historical background of communism and its repercussions. She just pretty much said, let's go, and then we went. But I later on found out why she made that decision. And of course now I agree with her.
And to follow up on that, we have a question from Madison at Mathis Intermediate, and she said, how did it feel to be on the ship going towards freedom?
Well, you know, I wasn't thinking freedom. I was thinking vacation because, again, my mother did not say, let's get on a ship and you're going to be going to the United States. She was very vague about it because she just didn't want problems. So she said, the war is coming to Saigon. We need to leave here where it's going to get dangerous. But she was very vague. She didn't say where we were going. She didn't say how long we would be going. She didn't say anything about not coming back. So the whole time I was on the ship, I literally thought we were taking some kind of weird vacation where we saw dolphins in the water and, you know, we brush our teeth with salt water. So I thought it was this great adventure. Eventually I figured out that the ship we were on was not going to turn around. And then by the time we made it to Alabama, I still really honestly thought we were going to go home any day now. And I was wondering why my mother was so insistent that I learned English as quickly as possible, because I thought, why? We're going to go home. It took about a year for me to figure out that I was not going to be going home. And remember, I wasn't thinking I'm on a ship to freedom, because Alabama was not freedom. I was thinking, why did my mother bring me here? And so every preconceived notion that you think a child would be feeling on this ship, it wasn't what I was feeling. It was just very much perplexity, bafflement, and then in Alabama, complete confusion and frustration. And it took about 10 years to work through all that to the point where you're like, oh, okay, now I understand why that happened.
And Jenkins' 6th grade book group has a question. Have you ever been back to Saigon?
I have. I still run a nonprofit that buys bicycles for poor children, for poor students in Vietnam, and I used to go back yearly. And then we had a daughter, and she's now 7. So I haven't been back for 7 years, just because when you have a young child, it's very hard to get on a plane for 19 hours and land in a very hot country. So we haven't been back, but we plan to. Vietnam now is a thriving country. It's not at war. It hasn't been at war since 1975. And you'd be surprised as to how similar the kids there are to you.
And the Oregon Episcopal School, Gracie asks, why did you name the book Inside Out and Back Again?
Well, it's because I didn't. I had another title for the novel, and that was the title I worked with the whole time I was working on this manuscript. And when I submitted the manuscript, I submitted the title, and my editor immediately said, oh no, this title is not going to work. So she put her head together with her other editor and came up with the title. I think I came up with Inside Out, a suggestion, and then they hooked on Back Again. My original title, which I thought was brilliant, was Buddhist in Alabama. Nobody liked that title, so I didn't get it.
That's funny. Mathis International School, you have a question. Mathis School, are you there? Okay, we'll come back to you. Fraser School, you have a question.
My name is Jadira, and I want to add on to what my peer Darius said, but I want to ask, what advice would you give a young writer or poet that is interested in creating a book but doesn't know where to start or how to add feelings or emotions to a story?
Okay. I think the best thing you can do as a writer is to, one, write in your journal and write relentlessly and write every night, and don't worry about punctuation or spelling. Just write. Get your feelings out. But that is step one of like 1,000 steps. The next thing I would do is take a writing workshop where you have an instructor who kind of guides you in putting a story together. And just know that it's a very, very long process. No one puts together a story on the first try. I would say that it takes 1,000 tries. And just remember to get good at anything, be it basketball or tennis or math or writing. You're going to have to give it a good 10,000 hours. So expect to have years of your life dedicated to this before you can figure it out. Right now, you're not going to know how to put a story together, and that's fine, because if it were easy, we would all sit down and do it, and then it just wouldn't mean that much. So I would say start with your journal, and the next thing to do is to sign up for a creative writing workshop, and then go from there. And you're probably going to be taking probably 20 to 30 workshops before you even begin to figure out how to put a story together.
Thanks. That's some great advice. Connors Emerson School, you have a question.
Hi, I'm Morgan, and why didn't Ha's brother teach her to fight back?
Well, we very much, my editor and I talked about it, and we very much wanted it to be a book that did not advocate violence. Brother Boot definitely had the skills to do a full-on fly kick, and he could have kicked this boy right in the face and probably had him fall down, but it wouldn't have been as satisfying to Brother Boot because he didn't want to hurt him so much as he wanted to send a message. And the message was basically, leave me alone, don't mess with me. And he could do that by nearly missing the boy. All he had to do was show the boy his capabilities, and he felt like that would have been enough, and it was. And so when Ha came to him and said, show me how to fight, because she is in this state where she feels like she needs to use violence, he very much was trying to pull her away from violence to an area where he wanted her to use her brain more than her fists. And it took her a while to understand that. And so that's why in the part where she could have kicked him when he was down, she chose not to, because her brother's words came back to her. So in both of those actions, it was a very conscious decision on my part to make sure that when she had a chance to do violence and when Brother Boot had a chance to do violence, they chose not to.
Mrs. Washington, or Ms. Washington, is an important figure in Ha's life when they moved to Alabama. Is she based on a real person, or is she a combination of different influences in your life?
She is completely made up, and it's for a very practical reason. When I was working through the manuscript, you know, after dealing with Pink Boy and all his buddies, I realized I had so many characters, American characters in the story that just wasn't very nice. Aside from the cowboy, there wasn't anyone else who was just genuinely kind to the family. So I thought I need to invent somebody who's going to help this family out. And basically what they needed was a tutor. So I just made her a tutor. In real life, we did live right next door to a woman. And I don't know what her name was. I think it was Mrs. Cover. And so she was our next door neighbor, but all I ever did was wave to her. She never talked. She never did anything with us. So she's very much made up.
And Mrs. Bauer's class, you have a question.
Hi, I'm Sean. I wanted to know, how did the Vietnam War affect your childhood, and how long did it affect you?
No, I'm sorry, I missed the question. Can you repeat it and say it slowly and loudly?
How did the Vietnamese War affect your childhood, and how long did it affect you?
How did Vietnam affect my childhood? You know what? Vietnam is my childhood. So to say that it affected my childhood is just, I would have to say 100%. I wouldn't be the same person if I weren't from Vietnam and I didn't live there and that wasn't my first language. As far as how has it affected me now, I would say that I'm a hybrid child in the sense that Vietnam will always be there, but I've been here 38 years. Things here are just going to sink its way into my bloodstream without me knowing it or not. And I used to obsess about which part of me was Vietnamese and which part of me is American. Now I no longer care. I'm just a hybrid, and it doesn't even matter where I land on which side. I'm just me. And I don't worry about it. You know, you just kind of live your life, and at some point, everything just evens out.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
In Memorial School, you had a question.
My name is Jenstein, and my question is, why did you move to Alabama? Was there a Vietnam community there?
No, remember, we were the first Vietnamese most people in town had ever seen. The reason we were in Montgomery, Alabama was because as refugees, Vietnamese refugees in 1975, you couldn't just land in a city and start living there. You needed what's called an American sponsor. Someone would have to stand up and say, we will show this family around, we will help them get settled. And usually the people who did that were people who were connected to churches. They had a reason for doing that, and so they could get you to join their church. And so the man who showed up in Florida, in the Florida refugee camp, was a man named Jack Ingram, and he owned a car dealership in Montgomery, Alabama. And he went there looking for one refugee with some kind of mechanical engineering background who could become a mechanic in his shop, and then he would also help he would also introduce this man to his church. And my brother, my oldest brother, was a mechanical engineering professor. And so he knew all there was to know about cars. And so when the sponsor approached him, he thought he was going to get one refugee. And by the time my mother was done with him, and she did not speak any English, she conveyed everything through her eyes. I don't know what she did. But then we, all 10 of us, that would be 9 children and 1 mom, we all had a sponsor to Montgomery, Alabama.
Kendall from Oregon asks, did you ever see and meet up with any of your friends that you knew in Vietnam as a child?
You know, I haven't, because I don't know where they are. In Vietnam, when you come from a large family, and most families in Vietnam are quite large, 6, 9 children, that's just, you know, it's quite normal. You tend to hang out with your siblings more than your friends. So you didn't have play dates, and you didn't have spend the night parties so much, and you didn't eat lunch at school. You ate lunch at home because everyone went home to eat lunch. And so the kind of social life that you had was completely surrounded, was completely dictated by your family. So then I was 10 when I left, and so I hadn't really branched out into my own friends. You tend to do that more in junior high and high school, and so I was still just surrounded by my family. I did have one best friend, her name's E.T., and she's in the book, and I don't know what happened to her. She tried to get out of Vietnam, and she left earlier than us, and we never did find out what happened to her. So no, I haven't connected with any of my friends, and it's been so long ago, I can't remember them, other than T.T.
We have a couple questions about why you chose to write the book in English. Several have asked from Connor Zimmerson and other groups, if the characters didn't know English, why did you choose to write the book in English?
Well, if I had written it in Vietnamese, then it wouldn't have gotten published here. And if I had written it in Vietnamese, I would have to have a translator, or I would just be translating it myself. My brain works in English. My education is in English, so I would think in Vietnamese, and then what comes out of my fingertips would be English. So I knew that my writing language is always English. And if I were living in Vietnam and I were writing for a Vietnamese audience, I would be writing in Vietnamese. But I'm living here, and this book is very much geared towards an international audience, an American audience, not a Vietnamese audience. And so I wrote it in English so that it's automatically accessible to you without having to go through a third-party translator.
In Fraser Magnet School, you had a question.
Hi, my name is Reagan, and my question is, in the poem Wet and Crying, you wrote, black seeds spilled like clusters of ice, wet and crying. What did you mean by that, and what did this symbolize?
Okay, well, you know, the papaya throughout the whole book pretty much symbolizes her authentic love for her old world. And when Brother Luke cuts it down, he's starting to cut down a part of her old world, her old self. And she knew it. She knew what was happening. And so because the papaya symbolizes this, and already Ha knows what's going on, she herself is crying on the inside. But I didn't want to say Ha is sad and she's crying. I thought it would be much more effective to have the sadness come from the papaya. And when the eye spills out wet and crying, it signifies what Ha is feeling without you having to say it.
Mathis International School, do you want to ask your question? We did have one question from Mathis. Yes. Okay, Mathis, try again.
Hi, my name is Alyssa. How did you feel when you had to pick one thing to take with you?
Well, yeah, that was hard. My mom did make us these sacks, and they were the size of half a pillowcase. So how do you decide what to take with you in a half a pillowcase when you are leaving this world, you know? I thought we were coming back, but even then for a trip, what do you take? So I took my mom said to pack things to wear, and it's hot in Vietnam, so you're thinking shorts. So you would pack your underwear, your shorts, no socks, because nobody wears socks in Vietnam, your sandals, one pair of pajamas, and your toothbrush, and your toothpaste, and she wanted us all to have rice so that we would have something to eat. And so that took up most of the bag. So that only left a little room for one private item. In the book, I had her take the doll, and in real life, I cannot remember what my one item was that I took. I might have taken a book. I don't remember. But in the book, I had her take the doll just so I could, like, work with it as far as the narrative.
And we have a question from Abby. She asks, what do you think teachers in schools can do to support immigrant and refugee children more successfully, based on your experiences?
You know, now it's 1913. I think there's so much awareness now as to how you feel when you start over. Remember, I was the first refugee anybody had ever seen in Alabama. So I can't blame them for being perplexed. They didn't know what to do with me. They had never seen an English learner before. Now there are entire programs. You can get a PhD in how to teach someone from another culture. So I think I think teachers are incredibly well trained now as to how to do it, as to how to help them. I think the first thing you have to do is, one, don't patronize, meaning, you know, how the teacher in my class, she thought she was helping by showing all the war images of Vietnam, and it turned out not to be my experience at all. I would ask the student to bring something and show the class what he or she wants the class to know about his or her home country. That would start a dialogue right there. And I would say not to assume anything because we don't know what the other person feels, and we have no idea what their previous life was like. You know, just because you're from Afghanistan or Iraq, we hear things about it in the news, that is true, but that doesn't mean the child sitting in front of you went through the exact same thing that it was on the news. you pretty much are going to have to ask, what was your life like? What did you eat? Where did you go to school? What did you wear? Who were your friends? What did you do for fun? All those basic questions so that you can start to put together a portrait, a biography of someone's life. And I think questions more than assumptions would go a long way.
Thank you. We have a question from Cameron, and he asks, why is it lucky for male feet to bless the house on Tet?
Well, because Vietnam is a male-dominated country, meaning everything is geared towards boys. And it's still like that. It's old world. It's left over from Confucius days. And you can't change a culture. That's just the way it is. Is it a sexist country? Yes, it is. But do people work around it? They do. So the person you want to bless your house is not your daughter, but your son, because he's going to bring luck. And it's always like that. You know, they want sons instead of daughters, although it's changing now. And my mother, even though she's very much a feminist, just wanted to make sure that that just in case she's wrong, let's just go ahead and be on the safe side and do it with the boys. And besides, she had so many boys, and so she just always asked one of my brothers to do it. And I, of course, being the girl, thought it was very silly, so I would sabotage it.
Connor Zimmerson, do you want to ask your question?
Hi, my name is Anna. Why was Pink Boy so upset when Hall was smarter than him?
Well, because I think in his head, someone who doesn't speak English, who's from a war-torn country, couldn't possibly be smarter than he. Because you know how you make assumptions about people based on what they look like, based on what they're wearing, based on the country you're from. You just think, oh, well, I'm this and they're that. And he was wrong. And this was her way of just getting back at him a little bit for making her feel bad. And she knew he was going to seek revenge. And she knew that if she made him look bad in front of the class, that he was going to probably do something like beat her up. But she did it anyway, because at some point she just couldn't take being the dumb one anymore. She had to show that she was smart. And so she did that, and Pink Boy was surprised. But I think if he was a truly smart boy, he would realize that, yeah, he probably could speak English better than her. Well, it's because English is, you know, she's just learning it. But that doesn't mean he's going to know everything that she knows. And we have to understand that just about every human being we meet. Somebody is going to know something more than you. It's just a fact of life. And then it's your job to sit there and figure out what it is.
Thank you. Thank you. We have time for about 3 more questions. So Ms. Bauer's class, if you want to ask your question.
Hi, this is Dylan from Lake Middle School. I was wondering if in the long run, do you think your life would have been better or worse if the Vietnamese War didn't happen?
You know, it's an impossible question to answer. I will tell you that my life would have been very different. Worse or better, I don't know, but definitely different. If I were in Vietnam, I would turn out to be a very different kind of woman because they would have shaped me differently. The things that are valued there are not necessarily valued here. The things that, the kind of gestures, the kind of self-awareness that's encouraged here might not be encouraged there, and that's not a bad thing. It's just cultural. I can't tell you for sure whether I would have preferred Vietnam to here because it just didn't happen. I will tell you that I'm very happy to be here now, but that's because it's 38 years later and I've spent a tremendous amount of time working on myself so that I could get to this point. So I don't know. I think other people who did not live my life can actually predict whether or not I'd like it there or here more. But I think it's because they are conjecturing it through their own experiences. Nobody knows. All I can do is live my life the way it is now without trying to predict or conjecture what it would have been like. I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
In Memorial School, you had one last question.
Hi, my name is Colleen, and you talked about your school days and how you dramatized a little, but did you really eat lunch in the bathroom?
I did. That was not a dramatization. You know, remember, I came from a culture where you did not have the lunchroom drama. You went home, Vietnamese students go to school 6 days a week, but they only went to school for half a day. So you either went to school in the morning and you came home for lunch, or you stayed home in the morning, ate lunch, and then you went to school in the afternoon, the evening. So we did not have this lunch at school business. So it was very new to me. And the fact that a lunchroom is so political as far as where you sit and with whom you sit and which crowd you sit at, it was like throwing me into outer space. I had no idea what was going on. And so much else was going on at that point that I just couldn't figure it out. And it was so tiring that it was just easier to eat my bread or whatever it was I brought in the bathroom. But I will tell you that I am not the only person who has ever eaten lunch in the bathroom. It happens all the time. Since I put that scene in, countless people, who were not from another country, just regular American kids would come up and confess to me that for whatever reason, they too ate lunch in the bathroom. Apparently, it was a very popular place.
And our final question comes from Willow. She asks, when you were little, did you ever think that you would have lots of students listening to you today and being inspired?
You know, it's funny. When I was little, I did think I would grow up to be a teacher because, I don't know why. When I played games with my mom as to what I would be when I grew up, she always said teaching because I was very bossy and she thought I would be a very good teacher. But, it is amazing. I didn't know that I would be a teacher here, although I have taught college, for a very long time. I thought I would be a journalist. And then after journalism, I thought I would be a writer. And so I'm completely just beside myself to have realized my goal of being a writer. I can walk down the street now, and if someone asks me what I do, I can actually say I'm a writer and mean it because I've been published and I've actually written something. So it feels really good. And it feels equally good to have written something that students read and that their teacher will take time to sit there and really like open up each sentence, open up each scene and kind of diagram the emotional aspect and the historical aspect that are hidden behind those words in that scene. And so it feels amazing. So I thank you.
So just a final few comments from the chat box. Alyssa from Mathis School says she thinks you're a very good author. And the Connor School says this was a great read and they loved it. Natasha says this is one of the best books that she's ever read. And Rodriguez says, or Amber Rodriguez says, she loves the book that you wrote. So thank you so much, Thanhha, for joining us today, for writing this book, for giving us this experience. This was really wonderful, and we appreciate it so much.
You are so welcome. Really, it's my pleasure. I'm thrilled to be connected with so many people at the same time and from all over the country. And so I love the way this is set up. And thank you. And all I can say is just keep reading. Mine is certainly not the only book out there. There are just hundreds of gorgeous books out there. So go read them.
Thank you. For the teachers on the call, there are more resources available. We've been sending emails to you. We'll follow up with an email and with a link to the recording today. There are a number of resources for the book, discussion guides, a letter from Thanhha, a reading group guide, and stay in touch with Primary Source. We would love to continue connecting with you over literature and global culture and continuing our conversations online. We hope to do this again next year, and we hope you'll join us again. Thank you, everybody.